Ladies and gentlemen, here we are with a covering of the sound settings being wrong. There we go. Of Season 1, Episode 19, A Dog and Pony Show, which is the episode in which the Diamond Dogs attempt to kidnap first Spike and then Rarity in order to force her to dig gems for them. Things then Looney Tunes their way forward, and Rarity ends up fixing herself at the end. That's the episode. First and foremost, we're going to have to add a Rarity Crush counter. Now, part of the reason, usually I do counters because they're funny or because they happen all the time, and it's that's part of the reason I do it. Sometimes I do counters because I'm actually curious how often it really happens, because sometimes in our memory things stick out more, even though they only happened like 3 or 4 times, you know what I mean? And so I wanted to go ahead and keep track of how often the Rarity Crush thing actually comes up. And this absolutely qualifies as a Rarity Crush episode. Now, yeah, this is only the 3rd Crush episode. I'm actually pretty surprised by that, which is part of the reason I mentioned that. Now I'm going to admit something that's going to make me hated by my entire viewer base. All of you are going to hate me for this. I kind of like this episode. Now, it's a fairly basic episode, and it Looney Tunes is a little bit too much, and it is definitely an early episode, as someone in chat actually mentioned that this might be an episode out of order, and that wouldn't actually surprise me. It ends on a wah-wah. I think this one's a pretty definitive wah-wah, and it has the Rarity Crush. And I don't know, it doesn't really acknowledge a lot of things that we've already established for the characters, so this could be easily considered an out-of-continuity episode. However, I still think it's probably one of the better early episodes of the MLP stuff. It does also establish several points that'll be relevant later. God, at this rate, I may have to not stream FF3 today. God, I am not doing well. So, Sapphire Shores finds out about Rarity's name. Now, that actually makes a degree of sense. Ignoring the fact that this is the kind of society where people would go ahead and keep track of other people. It also makes sense to me because Rarity is actually very talented. We've already covered that, in fact. And it also makes sense to me that she would try to pay attention to said, quality. So, okay. But I also like how Rarity totally fangirls over her. I know that sounds like a strange thing to comment on. It implies a small degree of humility. Let me give you 2 scenarios here. So I'm sitting here, and I'm like, discussing stuff and blah, blah, blah. And then, I actually don't have a good... Timothy Zahn notices me and is like, hey, Lore, you're awesome. And I'm like, oh my God, dude, you're amazing. Holy crap. Scenario 2. Timothy Zahn is like, hey, I noticed you're a good writer. And my reaction is, well, of course I am. Obviously, I'm one of the better writers of this area, so it makes perfect sense that Timothy Zahn would become aware of me. Like, you see the difference in attitude between the two? So I kind of like how they go out of the way to show that Rarity, for all her seeming pomposity, isn't actually all that pompous, except when they bother to write her wrong, which happens every now and again, but let's not get into that. So then there's the outfit. That is not true, Nerdman. And then there's the outfit, and I'm like, okay, what in the world is that outfit? It's actually not terrible. It's white, blue, and red. I feel like I've seen that combination of colors before. And they do this patterning thing with the large gems and the small gems. But for the most part, it just seems kind of gaudy. But then again, given what we saw with Sapphire, maybe gaudy is literally what she's going for, so... whatever, I suppose? I don't know. Moving on. Naturally, later on, Spike also knows who Sapphire Shores is, and is also, happy that she got a hold of Rarity. I only point that out very, very minorly. Yes, all we're doing is talking about Timothy Zahn, Nerdman. It's the whole episode is Timothy Zahn. So Timothy Zahn shows up, and Timothy Zahn is aware of Sapphire Shores. And that makes perfect sense, because as I've pointed out several times, there are several hints across many episodes that Spike is weirdly well connected when it comes to back in Canterlot. And as I've talked about already, that makes perfect sense to me. I mean, why wouldn't he be well connected, given that he is a dragon who is a pet, or excuse me, little brother? I don't know what actually to equate that to Twilight, who is the personal thing of the princess and blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. It makes sense that he'd be connected, basically. Yeah, he's the manager, exactly. Assistant. Number one assistant, at least until an owl shows up, in which case Spike will suddenly be terrible. That could be Sinister Wing. That's a valid point. Anywho, so then they have a spell to find gems, which is actually kind of cool. And I do like the idea of a spell that is specifically used to find gems. I also like the idea that it's something that Rarity herself has developed, given her particular cutie mark. I say developed, that's probably the wrong word. I don't think she designed the spell. I think it's just part of her natural magic. As we've already discussed, all unicorns have magic that works alongside with their special talent. So it makes perfect sense to me. But of course, I also love the idea that it's a thing that can be taught to someone else, but I want to get over that in a second. The other thing I want to comment on, though, is there's a lot of gems everywhere, and they're just under the surface. Now, as we'll see in much future episodes, there are so many gems in this region. Like, she's not going to run out anytime soon. They have hundreds upon hundreds of tons of gem caverns in this area. I find myself wondering, though, first of all, is there anything that actually replenishes those gems? Which I know normally would be a weird thing to comment on, but in a setting like this? Yeah, like exactly what Weows is saying. Like the thought that the gems actually grow. Yes, we're talking about My Little Pony. The thought that the gems might actually grow is an interesting thing to think about in a setting like this. Now, Sean says, would this make gems worthless? Actually, it kind of does in its own weird way. Gems are utilized as currency only a couple of times in the show, and I can think of a few specific episodes of that. But in each episode, when I say they're used as currency, it's pretty vague how much they're worth. More often, they tend to use the bits, the little coins that they have. So it's entirely feasible that gems, because of the sheer nature of how common they are simply substantially less valuable. For example, we have... she actually specifically mentions that she had used all of her diamonds in order to make that dress. I want you to picture for a moment a real-life dress that is adorned with that many diamonds of that size. And now picture how expensive that would be. Now, granted, in real life, there's a concept that I call the diamond industry, but you get my point. They're so super common that it's like, yeah, okay, sure, I'll put some over here just for the heck of it, just because the whim has caught me, because that's exactly what happened. She just felt like making one. And as weird as this sounds, I kind of like that idea that gems are so common that they could just use them, because why not? Oh, I have the wrong background on, don't I? I'm sorry, I still have the stuff from other lore from earlier. I apologize. Trying to be standardized. I even remember to change my outfit. There it is. And yeah, as several people point out, obviously dragons have a thing with gems too, so maybe that's part of it, or maybe they actually do grow them, or maybe dragons help make them have it, or something. I don't know. There's something going on here, but it's just interesting to think about the world building. So then there's a scene with a Rarity crush. As I already mentioned, this is definitely a Rarity crush episode. Diamond girls, or diamond dogs, excuse me. Reading ahead. I did a little looking into it. Diamond dogs show up a little bit in Equestria Girls, a little bit in the comics, but in the show, they only show up in one other episode in the entire series. The last episode. They are mentioned in the very last episode. That's it. I find that interesting. That of all of the random races which came back or didn't come back, these are ones that didn't come back basically at all. I don't mind, because they're kind of one-note characters, but it's the race, it's the hat race of the week thing over on Star Trek, right? So here's the Beglarians. What are they? Well, they all like gems. Okay. And we'll never see them again. This is another reason I say this is probably an early episode thing, because it's like, well, okay. Although apparently these diamond dogs have like an actual societal structure and in a cave network right next to Ponyville, and that never comes up. So that's bad world building right there. To contrast good world building and bad world building, there you go. Same episode. Now, obviously, yeah, where are the dogs underground? I know dogs dig. I guess that's like a thing. I don't know. The hell do I know? I don't know, Nerdman. Ask me again in about 3 years, give or take. I admittedly haven't even really thought about what show, if any, we'll do after we finish this series of Streaminations. Excuse me. Do I think Maud moved in? Well, kind of. I mean, they do go into the caves near Ponyville many times in the future, and those caves are very clearly abandoned, so maybe they were just like, let's just get out of here, and they just fled. So then there's this really funny... I mentioned that I kind of like this scene. It's because the humor actually manages to click for me, which I know is incredibly... I can't think of the words. And Lore Reloaded just distracted me. It's incredibly... case-specific? There's a term for that. Subjective. Thank you. God, maybe I should chop off early today. Jesus. It's incredibly subjective. Humor is incredibly subjective. By the way, we all know I would be Maud. Thank you very much. And just for that, I'm putting those bits towards Zelda again, because screw you. Unless you want to be stabbed? I'm cool with stabbing. So, there's this bit that actually made me laugh, where Rarity is being kidnapped and she's being dragged down. She's like, oh my gosh, no, help! And then she realizes she's gotten dirt on her hooves. And she's like, no, dirt! Ah! And I don't know why I see her on Nerdman. I don't know why, but that actually catches me every time I see it. It's like, yeah, okay. And then, of course, Spike has his no! I also like how Rarity got captured because she was worried about Spike. That was good. I like that. And I think that's part of why this episode works for me. It's not just the comedy. It's the fact that it kind of helps to flesh her out a little bit. Yeah, by the way, I actually have a note. No joke. In my note, right here, it says, God, Tabitha St. Germain is amazing. That's literally what my note says. She's an excellent actress. She's an excellent voice actress. And she does a lot with her voice in general, but also in this episode. Absolutely phenomenal stuff. Anyways, so... then we have him, rush off. Oh, God, we need to come back. What's happening? Girls. The pacing works very well for the humor, too. So they're rushing to save her. Spike goes ahead and explains what's going on. We have a bit of a Looney Tunes session. Another Looney Tunes thing with the dirt, and pushing against the onflow of dirt because that's how physics works. And then it's like, oh my God, what are we going to be doing? Now, two things I want to point out. First of all, Applejack has obviously gotten much better about about Rarity. Maybe I'll start with R. What do you want from me? All ponies look alike, right? And because of, remember how viciously and frankly cruelly she was making fun of Rarity in the previous episode I can't remember the name of right now. You can tell I'm out of it when I can't think of episode names. I'm usually really good at that. Look Before You Sleep. Episode 8. Look Before You Sleep. She was frankly actually mean to her back then. Whereas in this episode, she's actually, legitimately concerned. And it just kind of shows how the two have gotten a little bit more understanding of each other, which is a nice little tidbit. Second thing, though, I like her line, oh my God, Rarity won't even touch dirt unless it's imported. Now, obviously, that's just a joking line. It's just an AJ-ism, an Applejack-ism. But if I might be so bold, given what we see in much later episodes, it wouldn't surprise me if they literally have imported dirt in this setting. Oh, I want only the finest dirt imported from... You remember the episode with the country singer? That's a good example of how ridiculous people's requests can get. That apparently can be filled. Does it count as continuity? I'm not sure, admittedly. I'm really not. It depends, because there's a lot of the continuity of the show is kind of debatable, because a lot of it makes sense, but may or may not have been intended to make sense. You know what I mean? It's kind of like Star Trek. We have to kind of interpret how much the writers actually wanted things to connect, and how much they just kind of end up... This is going to sound like a segue, but hear me out. Perfect example of this is Section 31. Small spoilers. There's an organization in Star Trek that is called Section 31. They're the Black Ops of Starfleet. Very small spoilers. They were invented in Season 6 of Deep Space Nine. which is way into Star Trek's history. And yet, if you look back at so much of Star Trek's episodes in history, a lot of them make sense with the lens of Star Trek 31 existing, even though they wouldn't be invented for years. That's a good example of things making sense continuity-wise without it being intended to. So, just a little parallel there. All of my shows end up devolving into Mass Effect and Star Trek. I don't know what it is. So, they have the Looney Tunes section. Then they have the first fantasy sequence of Rarity, who was like, oh no, dirt, dirt, everywhere there's dirt, no, dirt, oh. And they're like, okay, we've got to save her. I like how they all mutually agree that she's just going to be horrified by the dirt. So then we have a second Looney Tunes sequence where they all have to dig and counter dig. They even have a section where they literally have the whack-a-mole sound effects, cling, 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 as they're smacking him down. All very slapstick, of course. This leads to fantasy number 2. She's being horribly accosted by all these horrible monsters. And she literally faints in the fantasy. They're like, oh my god, we've got to save them. Okay, no problem. I know what to do. And then Spike does his first clever thing, which is one of 3 clever things he does in this episode. He decides to use the gem as bait, which makes no sense, but whatever. This leads to Fantasy 3. Super muscular Spike fantasy with giant jaw. Like, seriously, his jaw goes out to, like, here, and it's pure chiseled. And he's always standing like this. Yes, I've got everything. The Dragon Knight is ready. And the woman who plays Spike, I can't think of her name, please forgive me. She does this like pseudo Elizabethan thing, the knightly thing. Attention, my lady, I will do it. I can't even do it. I can't even do it right now because my throat hurts so much. But there's this thing where he like adds like a to his tone as he's speaking. I will be able to save you, my. That kind of a thing, which is just hysterical. So of course he destroys everything effortlessly with his fire breath. Of course he has fire breath. And Rarity is of course in a full damsel in distress thing, and of course they have to kiss. I mean, that's what happens when you rescue a princess. She immediately wants to kiss you, right? I've seen old Disney films. I know how this works. So they use the gem, it drags them down, and they're like, all right, we'll save her. Which way do we go? No! So, second point of cleverness. Well, why don't we just follow the path of the gems? Oh, that's a good idea. This is also a weirdly interesting bit of probably unintentional continuity. Future, not past. In that Twilight has the ability to replicate other people's spells. Now, you might think, okay, but the thing is, as presented in setting, most ponies can't. Most ponies can't learn spells in that manner. They can't replicate different specific magical effects that other ponies produce. Twilight can. Now, of course, that makes sense because Twilight is Twilight. Her thing is magic, right? So it makes sense that she's capable of doing that. But that is a bit of a plot point, and it is a bit of a continuity point that will be coming forward several times in the future. Arguably, well, I don't want to get there, but that's one of the things that helps differentiate her from Starlight. I know that's way in the future. Starlight doesn't replicate spells. Starlight we'll get there. We'll get there. But Starlight doesn't just replicate spells like Twilight does. Twilight can replicate anything. Starlight can we'll get there. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. So, meanwhile, we see the first actual scene between Rarity and the Diamond Dogs, and she's like, no, please don't actually oh, you just want me to find some gems? Okay, here they go. They're right here. I like that. Then they're like, no, you must dig. Okay. And they're just, what are you doing? Well, I just got a pony cure, okay? And because I got a pony cure, I'm not going to ruin it. And you know what's funny? That is incredibly in character for Rarity. First of all, she's not stupid. Second of all, imagine for a moment if you just got something done, your hair done, and someone's like, screw up your hair. You'd be like, no, I just got my hair done, okay? Right? I mean, that's not even that hard of a thing to understand, regardless of gender. So it's like, no, okay, hang on. Like, okay, fine. We'll go ahead and dig for you. Just dig faster. Jeez, you haul the wagon. This then leads to her complaining about the claws. It's the wrong word. God, I can't think of words. I'm really tired. I guess claws are nails. Thank you, God. The nails of the things. Ah, they're digging into my coat, and this thing kind of hurts, and it's really kind of dark. Can I get some water, please? And she just kind of complains a little bit. But what's funny, and I was paying attention this time around, all of her complaints are very mundane and understandable. They're the kind of things that you or I would complain about under those circumstances, right? She's being pretty normal for someone who's effectively being enslaved. Then they tell her to stop whining. Then she starts whining. Quick side note. I've actually always distinguished complaining from whining in basically this exact same way. If I say this food is too cold, that's complaining. Whining is when you're just being a dick about it, basically. It's not just about the tone you use, it's about going completely overboard. No, this food isn't exactly the way I wanted it to be. If only it had 3 beans instead of 2, maybe that would be something I would enjoy, but this place is just going downhill, and that's whining, right? There's a difference there. And, of course, Tabitha St. Germain is amazing. This is when I made that point, because you want to hear whining. And she starts actually whining, and they're like, no, God, no, please, we'll do anything. Yeah, Ruth, getting your hair done is not a small thing. This is why. Oh my God. So then they all are like, okay, we'll do anything you say, please leave us alone. And they're like, wait a minute, this is stupid. You're going to pull these. So they put the thing on her, then they slap her and call her a mule. She doesn't actually whine in reactions, because the whining strategy has already failed. So she just turns and looks and says, did you say I'm a mule? What? No, I mean, do you think I'm ugly? By the way, I wonder what Yankee would think of that comment, but that's neither here nor there. And so, yeah, she switches tactics. She uses a different strategy and starts just sobbing like, no, please, are you calling? Did you say I'm ugly? Now, there's this really great note that I actually never noticed before. There's this really great beat where she's on the floor sobbing about how ugly she is, and one of the other dogs comes over and says, What happened? And she's like, he called me ugly. And the other dog just all of a sudden, and there's nothing to call it out, he just glares at the first dog like, really, dude? Why would you call her ugly? It's just a really nice, subtle point I never noticed before. Love the animation of this show. So, really, dude? So she's, oh, please. And then obviously this is when they start to hear her crying, so they use her tears to figure it out. There's also this funny little bit where they try to enslave the other ponies. Apparently, I wasn't able to confirm this, apparently there's a quote from one of the writers that said, it's completely normal for the diamond dogs to enslave other diamond dogs. As weird as this may sound, that actually makes a degree of sense. It's just pack mentality at that point. If you become the new alpha, then the others have to do what you say, right? So the dogs were just treating the ponies as if they're other dogs. Now, that doesn't really excuse it, but it does kind of explain why they're so blasé about what is effectively enslavement. It might also explain why the diamond dogs go away, because they were all executed by the Abyssians. So, they're all tossed off. Spike charges in on Twilight back to get Rarity, and Rarity is naturally completely on top of things. I mean, of course she is. And that leads to the final reason I actually do. So then they ended a wah-wah, which is whatever. But this is probably the actual... Yes, exactly. See, Shikor understands what I do. I do what I must. I am the Section 31 of My Little Pony, so that they don't have to be. I would totally do that job, by the way. This leads to probably my favorite part of the episode. Excuse me. Ooh. First of all, we do need to add a wah. I think that is a very definitive wah-wah. I mean, any disagreement? That's a super definitive wah-wah. And I just realized I'm counting these wrong. We're at 10 now, if this is a wah-wah. Wah-wah. But, okay, so everyone in agreement that qualifies as a wah-wah. The reason I like this episode is just because you like pretty, fancy, cute things. Just because you're feminine doesn't mean you're weak. And I point that out because, and this was apparently something that was very deliberately instilled into the episode by the writer. One of the things that Hollywood in specifically calling out Hollywood, is whenever they try to write a strong woman, they draw, and that doesn't necessarily have to be, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with a woman being that, but there is a very long-standing, trend of masculinizing females in order to portray them as strong. Yeah, strong, independent woman, right? Instead, she's just, it's rarity. It's freaking rarity. But she is more than capable of manipulating and maneuvering and out-strategizing her way through the situation. Because of course she is. She's not weak. Why would she be? I like that. I like that a lot, actually. And I do agree with the overall concept. And this was, I want to say, like the 8th or 9th episode I was introduced to. As I mentioned, Discord is how I became aware of the show. And then I kind of went back for my niece. And this was one that was posed to me specifically. And I was like, okay, sure. And I do like that kind of a message. I'm with it. Yeah, Princess Peach is another good example. Princess Peach is not weak, despite what some of the main Mario games would have. Anytime Princess Peach is allowed to actually be playable, she's awesome. And girly, and cute, and feminine, and a badass. There's no... Like, they're not contradicting traits, you know? And I like that. So... Given that, decent enough episode. I'm going to go and chop off the local recording.